By walking this ground, every time that they stump the ground, they capture CO2 from the atmosphere and they put it into the soil.
Welcome to the episode 6 of Leathertainment podcast on the go. Literally, this time we are on the go. This is the most special recording we're doing here out in a farm, an organic milk farm near Amsterdam. And I appreciate you guys arranging this beautiful setup to talk about leather's environmental impact and sustainability issues. And like previous episodes, we want to talk about this subject in 3 different sections: the rawhide raw material, because it's a complex supply chain, and then the leather production process, finally the leather goods. Then each has different context related to leather industry. Let's start with the rawhide, Florian. And what can we say about the deforestation, the carbon footprint of the animals that is coming from mostly meat industry, but highly related in topics to the leather industry today?
So it's a very, very complex topic that we discussed today. So we start with a meat consumption somewhere in the world, and one of the biggest meat markets is Brazil, because Brazilian people eat a lot of meat. So this is as well where we have the highest density of meat production, and with this we have the highest amount of hides available. So linked to this are tanneries, which are typically next to the slaughterhouse. So the meat producers own those tanneries, and then they go from the slaughtering into the deherring and into the crusting that we mentioned yesterday in our episode, and then it goes from there across the world, because Brazil is a leather consuming market, but it's not consuming all the leather that they produce by eating all this amount of meat. So with this, we as well have now the topic of deforestation when we look into Brazil or into the Amazon region. And this is a big concern for the rest of the world, because this is the lung. Because Europe and America, we destroyed the forests which have been there in the past. And Brazil, or the Amazon region, is one of the biggest areas in the world which still has these intact forests, and that is really crucial for us as a human society, as a global society, that we maintain this. So now we see that Europe has brought into place the deforestation law, which will now force as well in the sourcing that we look into, that we don't support further destruction of the rainforest. So there is a certain area of the land being frozen in, if you so want, which out of that area we are allowed to source hides, but out of other areas we would not be allowed to source hides. So that is valuable for all international brands delivering into Europe, but it doesn't mean that it is not going into somewhere else in the world. Right. So this is something where Europe tries to go into the front, and encouraging other countries to take the same view. So this is an extremely complex area. We mentioned yesterday the Leather Working Group in one of our episodes. Leather Working Group is now working with World Wildlife Fund to create these passports of traceability back of the hide to the birthplace. There's a shoe brand which is producing in Brazil, so they source the hides in Brazil and they produce in Brazil, and they were auditing one of their farms, and the farm is not in the deforestation area, but animals get traded. Right. And then they found a certain amount of animals being separated from the others, and they were like, what are these animals, and where are they coming from? And then they found out that these animals were born in the deforestation area, and they were like, okay, we stopped to work with this farm. And then they looked into more of the southern part of Brazil, where they found originally British cows and cattle, which would not survive in the tropical. So they really need a different environment to be able to live. So for them, that was the solution then, to say, okay, we are not buying out of the tropical area anymore. We are going further south, where there is no risk of deforestation. And now they're absolutely clear that whatever they source from these farms is has no link to any deforestation issues.
So, as you said, this is an extremely complex network of supply chain because it would be important to highlight that a cow might be born and raised in USA and harvested for meat. Then that hide is processed in one of the meat processors' tanneries to half level, like a wet blue or a protected stage. Then it gets shipped to a big tannery country. It could be Italy, it could be China. Then it turns into leather, and then leather goes to the leather goods manufacturing place. It could be Vietnam in this case, where it turns to a bag and then it comes back to Europe or USA as a final product. So it's a super complex process of production. And unfortunately, in the rawhide side of this environmental impact and sustainability issues, leather industry has so much force to say and make a difference in improving these conditions because of the economical share of the leather in the economy of a cow raising business. Like now we're in this farm producing milk. We get to learn that a cow in a 5 to 7 year life cycle produces 50 to 70 tons of milk, which is the main driver of this entire business. Whereas the rawhide of this cow after it's been harvested is not worth more than $100. Like it's way less than that, especially these days. So it's basically a chunk of change for meat producers that they exchange for their trash than leather industry takes. So they really don't have much incentives to listen the leather industry like on these deforestation issues and things like that. But again, I think leather industry is getting pressured by these laws and then implementing these traceability measures to put one more reason for meat producers or farmers to be cognizant of these level of issues. I think is that right?
Absolutely. But that is as well the challenge. I mean, as we have so little impact on the meat production or on the how we treat the animals, it is, as you say, really a waste product that the leather industry is taking now. What makes it more challenging is that as a consumer, we are now brought into a situation where it's about cheaper, 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 and it's about value for money. And we became a society which doesn't really care of where is it produced, how was it produced. We delocalized as well. We have a tourism of where do we have the cheapest labor for the moment, and it's interesting to hear that Pakistan is promoting themselves now as a production country for leather goods and shoes, and as well for tanneries, because labor is so cheap. And you're really shocked as a Western person with how little money a Pakistan person needs to live, because the average wages are like 130, 140 dollars or euros a month. And it's quite shocking. I mean, if I would think that I would need to survive with this little amount of money, it's very challenging. And we are used to this nowadays, and we are looking for this, and the industry is always doing a tourism, and then now we try as well to rethink, actually when we produce locally we can reduce our footprint. So there is as well a remembrance of what do we have here in the Netherlands, for example, with those cows. This farm has roughly 60 animals, and they grow up to 7 years. Some cows age up to 12 years. So there is a limited amount of hides available then from this farm. And what can be done with this? So that's as well maybe something, an incentive for the farm to look into. Can we find designers, local designers doing leather goods? Can we partner up with them so that we know that the supply chain is short, and with this as well the footprint of an end product reduces?
It's a great point, and I think there is a trend towards it. More people, independent designers and artisans, coming back to leather space to express their creativity, which I'm super happy to see in the end market. It enriches our experience because more talent comes in, but it also has this shortening of that supply chain and keeping this entire manufacturing process in the local economies, making everything shorter, quicker, and less impact and sustainable. I think it's a great point. There's another highly talked about aspect of the rawhide related to leather industry is the carbon emissions. We all hear this from everywhere. Like the biggest carbon emission is coming from the cow raising industry. And what does it have to do with leather, and what can leather industry do or is doing for that?
So what has leather to do with this? It's a good question, because there are two different points. As a leather manufacturer, you're like, hey, come on, this cow was producing milk. What do I have to do with this?
Right.
But it's fair enough to say, while it was producing milk, it was as well growing your material.
Right.
And while it was growing the material, the cow released methane, which is worse than CO2 to the atmosphere, as we know. But methane, and that is very interesting, after 10 years goes back to the soil or goes back to the ground, where CO2 rests for 1,000 years. So that is as well. Apparently, nature is doing something where we have a recycling process of methane, so that we see as well that the overall meat consumption for cows is very stable, even though that the human population is growing, but the meat consumption for cows and beef rests very stable. There is no increase visible the last years at least. And with this, we as well know that there is like a loop of methane, which is not increasing. So the question is, are we finger pointing to those animals doing something poisoning to environment, but they were there all the time and it's not increasing? But we as humans, we increase the CO2 footprint.
Right.
What those cows actually do, and that is so amazing, is by walking this ground, every time that they stump the ground, they capture CO2 from the atmosphere and they put it into the soil. And the soil needs it so that this grass that they are walking on is growing in the quality that the grass is growing. So there is, I think, much more when we look deeper and take time to understand what the animals do for us as well on the good side, because as well when they eat the grass they capture CO2, so there is CO2 as well in the leather later. And then with this, actually if we do it right, we can capture CO2 from the atmosphere. Yes, they release methane, but that is as well something coming from our own nutrition chain, because we like to drink milk, and we like to eat cheese, and we like to eat meat. And until this is not ended, I remember that in the last podcast you were mentioning, hey, there is a guy who is envisioning human species, we will nutrition completely different, and there is no meat anymore. So with this, we don't need to kill animals anymore. So it will be interesting, but we probably will still need the animals around to as well fertilize the soil, so that we don't have erosion happening, because that's as well part of the thing that the animals do here, just next to us now.
Okay, this
They
is
stump the
beautiful.
ground, they bring CO2 into the ground, and they fertilize the ground. And so with this, we have the soil being rich enough so that it's not eroded by the next rain.
I think it's great that we are kind of remembering how perfect and circular the nature's system is designed. Animals are doing an essential job. Initially, we realized we can drink cows like a couple hundred years ago, drink milk from cows and then eat the meat and make the cheese. Then this industrialization and capitalism gets in the way. How can we be more efficient, more profitable? Then we drive until we break the system. We realize, oh gosh, we're doing it super wrong now. We're heading a disaster. Then what we're trying to come back to is the natural way, like which we started with. So I think it's gonna be an effort, but it starts with an awareness. It's good that more people are recognizing it. Governments are trying to enforce more laws on corporates, which is highly focused on profits. So things are done in the natural ways that is sustainable and circular. And I think leather as a part of this industry, even though that doesn't have much impact, making its own contribution or nudging to the leather and meat guys to be as sustainable as impactless as possible. But I think we can move on to our area, which is we have more control and accountability. It's leather production process. The amount of water we use, the pollution out of the leather making process. Look at these guys, so beautiful, and it's the tinning techniques. So what are we doing, and where are we today in terms of impact of environmental sustainability and tinning industry?
Yeah, there's a slow move now, which is starting. There was, since many years already, chrome-free solutions on the market, and now the brands are picking up on this because they want to become cleaner and have less risk in their supply chain. We always hear again and again and again that there was Chrome 6 found in leather goods, so they don't want to be related to this anymore. And now we feel, at least here in Europe, starting a stronger push into chrome-free solutions. A chrome-free working group is being founded, and more brands are interested to join this working group. So it will be interesting to see that shift slowly happening then out of Europe, most likely, into other areas of the world. We have, of course, with the current situation in the politics, as well as strong back push. It's like almost these old white people who don't want the change and who don't want to admit that we have problems on our planet that needs to be addressed. So it's as well, again, there are the companies which say we want to invest into sustainability, and then there are the others where they say, oh no, we want to have it cheaper, so that we have a market, a reason to be on the market. So I think there is a split, as in society there is a split into a very rich and very poor. So that's as well something that we will see, where we have this split into more environmentally friendly ways of production, but as well then the other ones which are not so caring about the environment. Looking into the leather making, when you still research leather making and the dirtiness of leather making, what you typically find are leathers being produced in pitches somewhere in third world countries, with different colors, and we as well with the knowledge that those workers don't age very old because they are exposed without any protection to all kinds of different chemicals. And but then they don't show the state-of-the-art tanneries that we find in Europe, that we find in the US, that we find in Brazil, that we find in China, where it's very much automated, it's very industrial, it's very clean, and as well where the taking care of environment and reducing chemicals to the point only the much that I need is added to the leather. This is not shown. So there's a lot of misinformation, and then there is a lot of doing good and taking care of the environment and bring it a step forward.
It's tough, as you said. It's a complex operation. There's a lot going on, good and bad. But to simplify and deliver this message to the end user so they know a bit more and they demand the better versions is becoming more and more crucial, especially today now. Uh, the more you try to do these things in a better and sustainable way, it gets more expensive, as you said. The better facilities, better machinery, better processes you need, and there's a cost to it. Then it reflects into the end product. Then the problem happens in the market end because, as you said, half of the market says, I don't care where it's made, how it's made, as long as it's cheap enough, I'll buy that. But there is the other side of the aisle is like, I really want to know no one, no animal, no environment got harmed, as little as possible in the production of it, and I'm okay paying a little bit more for it, premium, a fair price. So I think it's important for people to be conscious about considering the price when they're looking at pretty much every product they're purchasing, especially leather these days, and expect it to be not the cheapest option, which is, I think, a good signal that that the brand producing this product is going out of the ways to be more conscious in these production processes. So there is a task for the end user.
Yeah, and that's something where as well Europe is changing or bringing a law into place where we will see in the future a so-called production passport, which will bring more transparency as well into, you will have on this production passport probably a QR code. That's how I imagine it. And then with a QR code, you can see where these products that are in the one product that I'm buying, where they were produced, because even just your jacket has a zipper now, and then they have seam lines. So where's the yarn coming from, and where's the fabric coming from, and where was it brought together, and all of this has a footprint to it, but it as well help us as a consumer to understand, what do I buy here, and was it sourced correctly? Was it sourced in a way that I can support, or is it a sourcing that I do not support? Was it produced in a country where I want it to be produced, or do I want a different article? So saying all this is, but as well, another thought I had while I was listening to you, because you have in your other podcasts where you take leather goods apart and you look into the value of the material.
Right.
So leather as such is an expensive material on the one hand, but then it is not. What makes it very often very expensive is the brand and the image that we are buying with this.
Exactly.
So I think as a consumer, we have fortunately a lot of choices in all kinds of price ranges. Leather shoes can start somewhere at 20 euros, but then it's questionable how was the leather produced and under which circumstances was the shoe produced. But it can go up to 2,080 euros for a similar pair of shoes, because it's just a pair of shoe that helps you to walk from one to another direction. And with this, I think we have a lot of choices, and Leather Working Group is now growing worldwide, fortunately, and it's as well respected by brands. And you mentioned it in the other podcast the other day that Leather Working Group is now appearing on labels as well. And I think that will help. So certifications will help the consumer and will help you to now make your choice on, what do I buy here, and do I feel safe with buying it, or do I leave it behind because there is no traceability, there is no transparency as well in the product.
I think there are great initiatives trying to push the industry forward for a better, sustainable, less impactful production process. Leather Working Group is, I think, one of the best examples, and people and brands, I'm using it in my descriptions, like Leather Working Group certified tannery, where I'm getting this leather from. And but we need more of it, probably like the Chrome Free Working Group, and each of it will have their own mission, third party independent institutions doing these checks on these very complex supply chains and processes, because it's not realistic for the industry to expect it from the end user to do the research and ensure what they're buying is done correctly. So I think it's going to be essential that we have more institutions establishing themselves as authorities that end user can recognize in the labels now. So there's a lot of good things being done in the industry where we have the most control in the leather production. We're happy to talk and make the end user aware of these things. But I think the most exciting part of the whole subject, is the third stage where the leather goods are made, because all this complex and somehow impactful work pays off when consumers choose the leather goods when they're looking for a product, a bag or a jacket. Because now what you're getting is a durable product. By choosing a durable product, you're buying less, stopping the demand for alternative, cheaper, and easy to break down materials. I think we can talk about that part, the real impact leather goods make as a result in the market and by people's choice in the environment.
Yeah. And that is a continuation, actually. It's really like supply chain is a big word, but the supply chain is important. And as well, so the sourcing, where are the hides coming from? Then the tanning process, how was it tanned? And how was it produced? And where was it produced? And then bringing it into the final product. And all of this is then adding to a footprint that we all buy and that we accept for the moment, because we are so keen to buy cheap, cheap, cheap rather than buying local.
Right. Indeed, and I've seen this comments in some of my videos. I look into bags from the cheapest end of the spectrum to the most high-end products. As you said, we kind of develop false perceptions against leather. Leather is super expensive. No, leather is not super expensive. The labels are expensive. That's what makes this kind of misperception. Leather is not cheap either, though, because it takes a lot of work, effort to manage all these things in the least impactful way in the production. So a good leather bag should be somewhere between $300 to $500 euros, 600. But if it's 3-4 thousand, it's different. But if you're looking for a bag that's $50 and it's leather, then there's a lot to question there, because to get to that price points for a profitable business, you have to cut a lot of corners. And those corners is going to come from environment, animal welfare, deforestation. So you could be part of this whole scheme if you're very focused on getting the cheapest products. And again, I don't see myself in the place to tell people what to choose. And some people says in the comments, it's as long as it's cheap, that's what I can afford, I'm going to buy it. That's completely your choice and freedom, but there's this impact when you're making that choice.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think it's a very complex and delicate subject. We could go on and on without reaching to a solution or a very clear call to action. But it's important to get some of these out there because it might be a less known stuff. And we have the final guest to close the podcast here.
She's bringing the bridge to what we do the next episode.
Animal welfare and ethical concerns in the leather industry. And I think they have a lot to say. We're going to do it here again in this beautiful environment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for another beautiful episode.
Thank you.